Welcome back, my beautiful souls, to the Jah Experience. I am Dr. Marga Lewis Jah. This is my handsome co-host, Joshua Shockley, and you are now part of our fourth segment on Out in the Open with Dr. Lewis Jah, where we speak about candid topics around mental health and sexual health. We are working to help people become comfortable with being uncomfortable about topics that are often taboo or that we don't get to speak about on a platform or that we don't get to speak about with our friends. And so trying to bring your voices to the social media aspect and of mental health and sexual health, and make sure that everyone's position is heard or questions are being answered based on what our viewers are interested in learning about. And so last week we did a segment on the stages of love, or the stages of a relationship, that the stages that a relationship can go through. And one of the question was,
the question last week was, why doesn't couples stay in the honeymoon stage? Which was a very good question.
Yeah, why don't couples stay in the honeymoon stage? That was a really good question.
Dr. Jah, you did a great job at explaining it and breaking down a lot of things that I personally didn't know, the 5 different stages, expecting that change in a relationship, understanding that this is something that will happen, so you can't get around it. Which kind of led us into our next question, which was really dope to see people are listening and paying attention and really want to know. So it's fun to have you guys follow along with us, and everybody's inboxing us and asking questions. So the very next question that we had was, how do we have that communication without the conflict?
I think that was something that also stood out with me. One thing that I did notice is that people spoke a great deal about arguments, breakups, chaos in a relationship, I should say. And so when you talk about, or when you ask about how that happens, the first thing that I thought about was increasing the viewer's ability to understand stages of conflict resolution.
And Dr. Jah, I want to point out that there were more men that asked this question than women.
Very nice.
A lot of men wanted to know how to have these conversations without having the conflict. So I just wanted to point that out because that's important, that, men are asking these questions and they want to know, how not to argue. Because sometimes we get that stigmatism that it's more of a man thing that starts the conflict than it is woman, and that's not the case. I think that it's both equal. It's both man and woman, and we all have situations where we kind of grow up and we're not always taught those communication skills. So, again, Dr. Jah, you did a great job last week of explaining, so I'm looking forward to seeing how you explain this to both our men and women.
And so, I think in our very first segment, we brought up the concept that this won't be, while there are important differences with gender, this platform is not to segregate the genders or gender behavior. It is to help us blend the form of the actual art of healthiness in a relationship. But I did find it interesting that a lot of the males who inboxed us, they were looking for strategies
for help.
It looked that way.
For healthy relationships.
Ooh, I like that. That's very good. And so that's kind of what we're doing too. We're giving people the tools and the instruments to not have the fires happening in their relationship, right? So we're giving them an emergency toolkit is what this platform is really all about. So getting back to the question, one thing that I think is important to put inside that emergency toolkit is what I call conflict resolution skills. When you have great conflict resolution skills, you can communicate about anything to anyone, especially your partner, right? The first part of conflict resolution is being able to know when to avoid a conflict, right? And by that, what I mean is, what's my goal, right? Ask yourself, what is the goal? What is it that I'm trying to communicate or I want to share with you? What do I want to have you understand, right? And so if we ask that question, that immediately can change the dynamic of our dialogue.
Dr. Ja, is there a healthy way? Because we know that life shows up, right?
Absolutely.
So me and my mystery lady are in the argument, and you know it starts right there. Is there a healthy way that I can say, "Hey, I need a break. Let me process this," without having that conflict? Is there a way that I can communicate that I need a little bit of time before we go into this conversation, just so I can process it better and nothing's coming off the wrong way? Is that something good to do? And if so, how do I say that in a healthy way?
So that's a loaded question, but I'm going to answer it as we look at these stages of resolution. Because the first part is you're going to be looking at the facts, not the feelings, right? Most times when people are in a heated argument, all they can do is talk about their feelings, right? Because it's true. They want what they feel to be expressed. But just because you feel it, it doesn't necessarily make it true. So again, it goes back to what's the goal? What is it that you want to share with the person? Because if you're looking at what the goal is, you'll be able to look at what the facts are, right? So ask yourself, what are the facts? Not what are my feelings, what are the facts about what it is that I want to communicate with my partner? What do I want to resolve here? What is the bottom line? And in order to do that, you have to be able to do what is included in the second stage, active listening, right? That's where people really
That's a
fall
tough one
short.
for both men and women.
Absolutely.
Even myself.
Absolutely. It is.
So like you said, you get into that tug of war. You want your emotions. You want your feelings.
Absolutely.
You want your words to be heard. And we don't always take accountability for what someone else may be feeling or what they're going through, how their day was.
Then it becomes almost a relationship power struggle. And this is something that creates a massive fallout in a relationship. And so it's, there's a saying that goes, seek not to be understood, but to understand, right? And so sometimes if we just listen, we will be able to understand what the person is better saying to us instead of us wanting to put our position forward and say, well, this is what I mean. Active listening means being able to have that dialogue and really processing what the person says. If we look at and that rolls into, that rolls us into the next part of the third stage that I want to talk about, or the third phase of conflict resolution, is practicing assertive, not aggressive, communication.
And can you break that down for us, for some of us out there who might not know what's the difference between
assertive and aggressive?
I'm not the best Webster brain here, so for me and for some of our other viewers who might not know, can you break that down and what's the difference?
Yep. And so let's talk about assertive communication first. No, actually, let's talk about aggressive communication first. Aggressive communication often will be marked by loud speech, right? Harsh tone, blaming, over talking, exactly, not allowing the other person to express themselves. It is what it is. It's aggressive, right? It shuts down the other person. Whereas assertive communication does the exact opposite. You use what we call I statements, right? So they're talking about from your point of view, your position, as opposed to telling the person, no, you don't feel that, or no, that's wrong. Well, no, just speak about yourself, right? So we use I statements. The next part is no judgment. If your partner has something, or an opinion, I should say, something to say or an opinion that differs from yours, it's okay. They don't have to be judged on it. You're entitled to have your feelings. They're entitled to have their feelings. But if you're both examining the facts, you won't get caught in that trap anyways.
So that kind of goes back to knowing, asking yourself what you want the outcome to be, right?
Absolutely. Going back to the very first part, what is the goal here?
And that's why these steps that Dr. Giles pointed out are so important. So definitely pay attention. I want to revert back to even the quote that you gave us to
seek not to be understood, but to understand.
Yes, that one, which was very good.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm hoping that you're going to apply that for yourself. But you know what that statement, in all honesty, so that statement also allows for each person in a relationship to demonstrate some dignity and some degree of respect, right, for
Absolutely.
the other person. And so maybe we won't be on the same page or agree, and it's okay to agree to disagree. But in that, we actually are respecting one another. That's exactly what happens there, and this is all part of assertive communication, right?
So, is it safe to say, Dr. John, that communication can make or break any relationship, not just a
Absolutely.
relationship with your partner, but
Mm-hmm.
relationships with everyday life things, with your
Mm-hmm.
supervisor, with your mother, with your father, with your
Absolutely.
children. That communication piece is very, very huge.
Yeah, it's extremely important, right? There's another saying that says you can say anything. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. And
Yes.
so it's how you say something. And also the other portion and the last portion that I don't want to forget to include in the conflict resolution is seeking solutions, right? If you're going to bring a problem up, be focused on what the solution is going to be. So often we get entangled in the conflict because we're focused on the problem. We can spend 5 hours in the same household with our loved one arguing about what the problem is. But how much of that time does either partner ever say, wait a minute, well, what's the solution to this? Right? And so when you're seeking the solution, again, well, what do you want? What's the goal here?
So, Dr. Ja, is it good to have that solution already before you present an argument or a communication piece with your spouse, or is it something that you want to let happen organically after you hear your spouse's or your partner's view or take on things?
I'm going to tell you one of the things that I think I'm really glad you asked that. One of the things that is extremely important is that when you begin a topic of a conversation where you know it may create, and sometimes we begin conversations, let's be clear, and we don't know it's going to create the outcome. How many times have you said, I just asked the question, and then you're like, what happened? I don't even know what happened, right? And so you do. But here is the key: when you want to talk about something that you do believe will create maybe a fallout or some degree of contention, begin with the end in mind. So I always say, offer the solution first and then talk about how the solution is going to fix the problem. We are a society where we hear bad things, and that happens for us consistently, right? And so that's the thing that we gravitate to. When you start with something that is solution focused and you train your relationships, like you said, in the workplace, with friends, with partners, you train your relationships to hear the solution first, the outcome is going to look extremely different for you and for the person that you're with.
So, Dr. John, that made me think about a quote.
Okay.
Healthy habits are learned just like bad ones through practice.
Absolutely. Oh, that's a
So
good
we have to
one. I like
continue to
that.
practice these good habits. We have to
Absolutely.
continue to take all the knowledge that we're getting here at Out and Open with Dr.
Mm-hmm.
John. This is what I love about being a co-host here.
Mm-hmm.
It's because we have this opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to bring everybody in
Yep.
and
Absolutely.
have these raw conversations about everyday issues that we
Mm-hmm.
deal with. Because again, communication doesn't just have to do with your relationship. It's how you're dealing with your supervisor, how you're dealing with your children, how you're dealing with your siblings, your parents. But especially, in our relationships, those who we're sharing our everyday life with.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And communication and conflict resolution go hand in hand. And so bringing us back to what the last stage, last phase that we were talking about when we're seeking solutions, please remember that this is the art of compromise. This is negotiation. In a relationship, there's negotiations. Even when you go to a place of employment, you're negotiating what your salary is. They're giving you a set of expectations. You're giving them back information, but you are very much including yourself in that process. And so negotiations happen the same exact way. It's about compromise. the end goal and what we want is a win-win situation, right? And so seeking the solution has to be a continuing process throughout the
Dr.
relationship.
You said a very, very powerful word that I just want to point out because I want everybody to catch it. Expectations.
Yes.
Those expectations, not having those unrealistic expectations and not setting up your own expectations before you have those serious conversations.
Absolutely. And sometimes that is the biggest trigger going into a conversation, when we have an expectation that someone will behave or do something the way we want, as opposed to recognizing that we have to be an active listener and allowing them to have their own feelings and their own thoughts and being okay with it, right? I say, hey, I want this for my birthday, and you're like, well, that's not what I got you for your birthday, and you had this expectation. Well, I thought you were going to do this and you were going to do that. Well, you kind of set yourself up believing that the person was going to do XYZ for your birthday, and they had intentions to do something different, right? And so this is where it comes back again to us not setting the expectations, because the expectations, placing them on other people, will inevitably lead to some type of conflict.
Absolutely.
So I hope that we answered our viewers' question today as we covered the topics of communication and conflict resolution. So again, if there are any additional questions that you'd like to hear, we are doing this segment. We're going to do it until people stop asking us questions, maybe, right? Because there were so many questions, and we have a lot of content to get to. So,
and please get ready for our next segment, because I'm excited about the next question that a lot of people were asking about having those real questions. What are the best questions to ask in a relationship?
Yeah. And so there were a lot of individuals asking questions, especially around sexual health topics and how you engage and embark in having open and transparent conversations with your partner or your intended partner. Or there was questions also about people who are not your partners. So let's just be clear. However, though, I cannot wait for us to get into some of that information and dialogue, because we really do want to answer everyone's questions. So this is our opportunity, and this is what we hope that we are bringing to you, as much content knowledge as we possibly can. Thank you. I like to say thank you for everyone who is everyone who's putting the questions into our DMs, because they are amazing questions, and I'm really excited to get to the content and get it covered. We, as always, are very thankful that you have joined our platform to, again, get comfortable with being uncomfortable with the dialogue around mental and sexual health. And so we thank you for being here. Until our next segment, please continue to be blessed and well. And don't forget to
like, comment, and subscribe down bottom. And as Dr. Josh said, thank you all for listening and tuning in. I know we have a lot of fun on the show, but our conversations are real. They're genuine, it's raw, and this is real information. Thank you, Dr. Ja, for your expertise and allowing us to pluck your brain. And until next time.
I do want to say one additional thing. Again, if the information is not for you, then please still share it, pass it along, repost it, send it to some family member, because what might not be applicable in your life may be applicable in someone else's life that you know. And so we would like to get the message out to learning how to be comfortable with uncomfortable dialogue. So again, thank you for joining the Jaya Experience. We look forward to your questions and coming back next time in our next episode. So have a great one. Continue to be well and safe.